You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi. On today's episode, I have a very special guest with me. Author, host of the Classical Ideas podcast, avid cyclist, Buffalo Bills superfan, Greg Soden, whose book Unscripted Moments, Conversation with Propagandhi 2020 to 2025 is available for pre-order right now. How are you doing, Greg?
I am delighted. It is wonderful to be on this podcast, so thank you for the invitation.
So I just want to start by going back to the beginning here.
hmm
It says in your bio that you grew up in St. Louis. Can you please just tell me what that was like?
So, St. Louis is in the state of Missouri in the middle of the United States. It's about 4.5 hours south of Chicago, which is the city that my friends and I would constantly fantasize about going to because we saw Chicago as a real city because they got all of the punk shows. And it had public transit, like trains and stuff that take you all over. So, I grew up in St. Louis, and I went to a school district called Rockwood, and I lived in the suburbs. And it was just, exactly like every other suburban life growing up, pretty much. I was in Boy Scouts. I would like to go to Six Flags. I went to Lake of the Ozarks a lot, which people may know from the Netflix series Ozark, which coincidentally is filmed in Georgia, not Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri. But I went to Lake of the Ozarks a lot and had a lot of really great friends in the area. But yeah, I was just a completely mediocre student my whole life. And I don't really have any bad memories of it. My friends and I were just kind of bored of the whole suburban thing that so many other people have experienced in their lives. But it was okay. It could have been a heck of a lot worse for sure.
Did you, as a young St. Luton, I don't know
St. Louisan.
St. Louisan, God, that sounds terrible. As a
Yeah, I
young
don't know
St.
about that.
Louisan,
Yeah.
did you find yourself to be like an avid reader growing up when you were a child?
I would say no. I read some when I was a little kid, but some of my most vivid memories of reading are the Calvin and Hobbes anthology collections that I still all have in my library in the back of this house. But I would not say that I was an avid reader. I read a bunch of Goosebumps stuff. I read some stuff that school assigned to me. One of the biggest books I ever remember reading in high school was called The Power of One by a South African author named Bryce Courtney. And it was kind of like a novel about boxing, but taking place during the apartheid period of South Africa. I think that's the most extensive reading that I really did in high school was something like that. But I got kind of into it later on in college whenever I started trying to commit to being like, okay, I am capable of building my intelligence and learning. I should try a little harder. So that didn't really come for me until later.
So you mentioned the Goosebumps books. Would you qualify yourself as an R.L. Steiniac?
I mean, back then, yeah, for sure, but not in 30 plus years at this point, I would say.
My neighbor growing up, um, his name is Ricky Maybe. He's an actor. He was in the Goon movies as
Hmm,
well, but he actually was in the Goosebumps TV series when it first came on TV.
very cool. Yeah, those were some of my favorite books in elementary school. Just kind of didn't really click for me. I do have one vivid memory of when I learned that reading could be pretty cool. I went to this record store in St. Louis called Streetside, which I eventually wound up getting a job at later on. But I was just this 14-year-old who would go into the record store and be flipping around with all the CDs. And I bought a Ramones album one time, and the guy behind the counter was reading a biography of the Ramones called Hey Ho, Let's Go, I think it was called. Just one of those random music biographies that get released every once in a while. And he wound up giving me the book a couple of weeks later. So he was reading it while working. I bought a Ramones CD, and then a few weeks later, he gave me the book. And so that was kind of when I realized that reading could be pretty cool. And then I went on to find more music biographies. Like I think it was called When When Gods Walked the Earth or something like that. It's like a Led Zeppelin biography by a writer named Mick Wall. And then I read Lobotomy by Dee Dee Ramone. So I was finding books later on, like at the end of high school, I would say. But that's kind of like a little bit about my reading journey.
So, and we know your reading journey, but so how did your musical journey start? So, like, did you get into music from a very young age? What was the first piece of music that you really connected with?
So my parents would once in a while play stuff like Boston and Kansas around the house, and I still
More
love
Than a
those.
Feeling. It's a
Dude,
jam.
it is a perfect record. I love that record. I really always liked Freebird by Leonard Skinner. One of my uncles was a big Tom Petty fan, and another was a They Might Be Giants fan. So those are some of my earliest memories of being exposed to music. One of my uncle had an REM album. I think it was Out of Time. I think it was
Great
called.
record.
Yeah, and so I heard those things as a kid, and I was really into Def Leppard Hysteria. My dad had that on vinyl, and I would play that regularly, and I was drawn to it because I loved the cover so much. And he also had Led Zeppelin In Through the Outdoor. So there were a few of those things that I gravitated on in the house. My earliest memory of finding stuff that I would go on to become like my music would be I was 10 years old. I was in the back of my friend Kyle's car and we were coming home from basketball practice. His dad was driving. Kyle put on 105.7 The Point in St. Louis, which is like the alternative rock station. It probably still is, but at the time it was. And Basket Case by Green Day came on, and Kyle was my age, 10, singing all the words sitting in the front seat. And I was like, whoa, what's this? And so that was something that I went home and I got like a little radio that my dad had in the garage and I snuck it into my room. And then I started tuning into 105.7 The Point. And it was like Bush and Pearl Jam and Green Day and The Offspring and, other songs like that. Mary Moon, she's a vegetarian, like that song.
Oh yeah.
So there was a bunch of stuff and Better Than Ezra,
I gotta
good.
imagine you had some Weezer Buddy Holly in there as well.
Definitely, definitely. So those were kind of like my earliest experiences finding music. And I remember that one year for Christmas, my mom and dad bought Dookie for me on CD that later that year because I begged for it. And then it was kind of just from there, finding a lot of stuff that was kind of like that. And then I went to sixth grade, and this guy that I was friends with at the time made me a mixtape with a few songs from Tool Undertow on one side and um, a few Pantera songs on the other side and a few White Zombie songs as well. Then he made me another one that had some Rancid Out Come the Wolves on one side of it, and I can't remember what was on the other side of it. So I kind of got like a metal and a punk mixtape from this one guy in sixth grade. And then I went to Boy Scout camp that year, and one of my friends there brought the Vandals Live Fast Diarrhea and Pennywise Unknown Road, and then White Trash, Two Hebes, and a Bean. So those things came into play next. So it was kind of a cascading effect, but there was a few very, very important moments, like getting that Dookie CD, getting those two mixtapes, and then going to that Boy Scout camp and hearing something like Unknown Road. And Unknown Road was a really huge record for me, for sure.
So you mentioned mixtapes, and I know you're someone who's very active in current events and politics. Um, I'd love to know your thoughts on the correlation between the decline of mixtape culture and the decline of Western civilization as a whole.
Oh boy. I don't really know how to reconcile that, but I can definitely tell you that I feel like music was a lot more exciting in the mixtape time than in the playlist time. And I just read I think it's called Mood Machine by Liz Pelly. It's like the story of like the rise of Spotify and like the rise of playlists. And there's just something that just is lost when people can just drag and drop stuff or when stuff is just fed to you and you're not choosing it. Like when you make something for somebody else, like you are really choosing to commit time and energy to that, to creating that product. And I don't make mixtapes anymore. Like I don't have a functioning stereo that has a CD player and a cassette tape deck that both function. I have one stereo where the cassette tape functions, but the CD function doesn't, and then another stereo where the CD functions and the cassette doesn't. So I cannot make mixtapes, but that was a really, really essential gateway into art and music for countless millions of people, I would say. And it's just not the same now when you can just like drag stuff into a playlist on Apple Music or Spotify or whatever, and then, text the link to it to somebody. It's just not the same.
Playlists seem very disposable, where mixtapes, there's so much effort and intent that goes into the
Exactly.
process,
Yeah.
and I just don't think that's replicatable in the playlist world.
Yeah, I agree. But I had those two mixtapes and they were super, super important to me. And another thing that's funny in my musical journey is that I had this friend whose mom and dad were like huge music fans and they would buy new CDs all the time. And this guy was such a sneaky individual. He would like steal CDs from his parents and sell them to me at school. So like the way I got Tool Enema is that he stole the CD from his parents' record collection and sold it to me for like $10 in our middle school. So I found a ton of music from my friend stealing his family's record collection and selling it to me.
I mean, his family was probably on like Columbia House or one of those like 20 CDs for a penny, and then they charge you $700 for the next four kind of thing.
I mean, maybe, who knows? But like, I have no idea. But I know that I got at least 10 CDs from him as well, which are things that he just like flat out lifted from his own family's CD collection.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I know. So that, can you imagine like coming home being like, I really want to listen to, you know, Learn to Swim or 46 and 2 by Tool. And then it's like, where's that CD? Where'd it go? It was just here yesterday. And like your child has like stolen it and sold it at their middle school.
Like imagine coming home and wanting to listen to Enema by Tool, and except that's a very, very specific subset of person that has the urge to listen to that record. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm trying to remember what else he sold me. I know there was a I know he sold me Pantera Far Beyond Driven as well. I know that for a fact. So those are the two that I can definitely remember came from him.
amazing.
Yeah,
So, transitioning to talk about the book for a bit.
sure.
So, being from St. Louis and currently living in Buffalo, New York,
Yes.
what inspired you to write a book about a fictional band from Winnipeg, Manitoba?
A fictional band? Well, as everybody knows, they're not a fictional band, but just for the sake of fun, I found Propagandhi. I found out about them because I was in this band in high school called the Shorties, and we were trying to make friends with all these other local bands. And there was this band from, I think it was from Festus, Missouri, which is a town about an hour south of St. Louis, called Dumb Luck. And they, in our opinions, were awesome. They all had mohawks. They were a little older than us, and their songs were pretty good too. And they would cover Bad Religion and stuff in their live sets. So one time I met up with them because they liked our band and they were trying to do like a little DIY record label. So we met up with, I think it was a guy, man, that guy must have been good, the guitar player, but I think it was a guy named Bobby. And we met him in the parking lot to give him a copy of our CD so that he could take it home and listen to it. And we were like, "Oh, what's your favorite bands and stuff?" And he said, "Oh, my favorite band is Propagandhi." And at that time, only How to Clean Everything and Let's Talk More Rock were out. So my band then had to go and record some more songs with this guy in town. And so I had the band name was Propagandhi, is the way he said it, but I had Propagandhi in my mind just floating around in there. And then when I went to the album with my band, the guy who was recording us had a copy of How to Clean Everything on CD in his house. And I've told this story on the podcast before, but I don't know if he loaned it to me or if I just took it. It's one of the two, and I actually have asked that guy um, on like Facebook Messenger a couple years ago, be like, dude, did I steal How to Clean Everything from you? Because I definitely got it at your house. And he's like, I have no idea if you stole it or if I gave it to you. So it's one of the two, and neither he nor I can confirm the actual memory. But that's where it all came into play for me in like the spring of 1998. Um, and then for some reason, this band just like they just clicked with me forever. Like I was so into Strung Out, Twisted by Design, and then I got into Propagandhi, and it was a just kind of a when less talk when Today's Empires Tomorrow's Ashes came out, it just clicked for me. I was like, oh, this is 100% my favorite band, and no band on earth is possible of topping this. And it just kind of became a lifelong obsession that has now spanned 27 years, which is pretty crazy to think about.
I'm going to be perfectly honest right now in that in prepping for this interview, I read a whole bunch of author Q&As and I just stole a lot of the questions that I'm
Dude, I
repurposing
love it.
here.
Yeah, I love that.
So the next question is, the main character in this book plays guitar. What about that specifically interests you?
Playing guitar. So I am terrible at guitar. I have a couple of guitars. I almost never play them, nor will I, and I shouldn't even own them. I should probably sell them or give them away to somebody who would actually appreciate them. However, I am very impressed with Chris Hanna's guitar playing. I always have been, and I always will be. Even songs that I've heard 1,000 times or whatever, you know. So that is pretty funny that he is seen in this book as the main character. How many interviews is Chris in? So we got the duplicate keys chapter, we got the true gamble and what price would you pay chapter, we've got the catastrophic break with consensus reality chapter, and the at peace recording chapter. So Chris is only in four of the 22 chapters of the book. So he the main character? Who knows?
I We'll leave that up to the reader to decide.
Yeah.
Um, what would you say is your favorite passage from this book?
Oh my gosh. That is an insanely difficult question because it's 352 pages. It is 117,000 words. But I would say that probably my favorite passages are the ones that you and me and Keith wrote, like because we've, hosted the podcast now for so many years, that I see you and him basically as like extensions of my own family, because of the experiences that you and I and Keith have had together. Um, those passages mean a lot to me. But I would say that, let's see, what is my favorite interview in this whole entire book? I would say that if I had to pick my favorite interview, it would be the A Catastrophic Break with Consensus Reality big interview with Chris, because he talks about his entire Catastrophic Break album, some of his favorite music, some of his favorite memories, just his story as a music fan. I really like that one with Chris. I really, really like Todd's "Fuck the Border" interview because he talks all about his, his development in music and growing up and his first band. And I love the John K. Sampson interview as well because that was like 3 years in the making before that interview happened. So I think those are my top three.
You mentioned the book has 17,000 odd words. Well,
117,000.
117,000 words. What would you say is your favorite?
My favorite word?
Yeah.
I wonder what the most frequently cited word in the whole entire book is. There's a lot of swearing, so probably shit or something like that. So that's probably my favorite is just the swearing. Also ayahuasca. That's a big one as well.
Um, what books or other authors inspire you?
In general, from any genre.
Yeah.
So some of my favorite authors off the top of my head, and feel free to ask any follow-up questions about any of these, are Mikhail Bulgakov, Barbara Kingsolver, Margaret Atwood. I really enjoy Haruki Murakami. And hmm, I don't know. I'm just gonna shout out my a couple of my friends who are authors as well, like Aaron Carnes and Sheldon Burney and Wabgishig Rice. So those are some of my favorites.
How would you say reading books by these authors um, impacted your writing in this book?
I would say very little because the writing of this book was not writing in the traditional sense, and it was far more of an editing process than a creative writing process. Basically, what I had to do was I had to transcribe every single one of the 22 interviews that I've done with members of Propagandhi, and I had to clean up the language. So when you get a transcript, you have to go through and fix every single spelling error, every punctuation error. You have to condense for brevity. So you have to remove all of the uhs and likes and random filler words and things like that. So it was a really grueling process. But I would say that the book that inspired me the most as far as this this book's structure goes, I would say that it is the Dan Sinker book where he did the collected interviews from Punk Planet magazine. And man, what is that book called? Dan Sinker. I I really, really wish that I could find the title of that book right now. The collected interviews of Plunk Planet. I'm going to look it up. And since I'm the editor of this podcast, I will not even be editing that. Okay. So the book that inspired this book's structure the most is called We Owe You Nothing, Punk Planet, The Collected Interviews by Dan Sinker. And Punk Planet is I've owned a bunch of issues of it over the years. I have an issue in the back room right now where John K. Sampson is on the front cover of it from the Weaker Thans. But this book is a Q and A structure just like the collected interviews from Punk Planet. Every chapter of this book has a little intro blurb, just like the collected interviews from Punk Planet. And then the very condensed and highly edited interviews, just like the collected interviews from Punk Planet. So this book was really modeled after that. And I always had a copy of We Owe You Nothing on my desk while I was working on this because I just wanted to see what kind of ideas Dan used for his final draft. And Dan put pictures of all of the interviewees throughout his book, and so did I. So, it's a very similar structure to that. If anybody's familiar with that book, it's a super great book, and I used it and was very inspired by it.
So, one character that really resonated with me in the book was the Todd character. Can you please
Hmm.
tell us more about how that character came to be?
So the Todd character is based on a real life human being who actually exists in the world called Todd Kowalski. Todd plays bass, writes songs, and sings for Propagandhi and also for a band he used to be in called I Spy. We talk about all those stories in the book. But Todd is just such a great hang. You know what I mean? He's so enthusiastic about his art and creating stuff. And like I love talking to him about his work on like Blender and his painting and also his songwriting process and his daily routines and things like that. He's a very inspiring guy with how disciplined and hardworking he is. And he's also so open with his own struggles with his own art and with his own songwriting. So it's so cool to hear those stories from him. So that is something that I really took from those chats with Todd. Great, great hang.
Um, People who know you in your personal life, I think would describe you as a very quiet man of few words.
Oh, they
So
do they?
what kind of how did you get all these words out of you into the book because you're not someone who talks a lot.
So that's bullshit. I talk pretty relentlessly, as some people might tell you. However, I do have a an extroverted introvert streak where I just kind of like lock in on watching, reality TV show competitions and stuff like that, and just kind of retreat from the world. But I also spend lots of time in complete silence during my workday, where I'm just like grading essays and hanging out at my desk. Also, while I'm editing podcasts, are times of extremely sustained periods of silence with no talking. So, people, by the time I'm around, my friends and loved ones, I am blah, 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 blah. A little too chatty, maybe. But in my very personal time, when I'm just alone, it's lots and lots of sustained silence. So, the interviews are, just a portion of my identity that comes out, just because I enjoy recording people's life stories so much. My favorite thing about doing these types of projects is recording life stories. And you mentioned Classical Ideas podcast earlier. That's what I see Classical Ideas as well, is like a collection of life stories where people talking about their lives and their expertise. So I just find life stories to be so completely fascinating that it never bores me to ask people about their lives, and that's why it exists.
Interesting, because when I mentioned to a few fans of yours that I would be having you on the show, they were concerned that the dialogue wouldn't be as natural because you're a man of such few words. But here we
Oh
are. I
yeah.
think it's working out.
I'm doing my best here. I'm really just trying to come out of my shell at the age of 41. I'm really doing my best to get out there in the world and be a social creature.
So another character that I really enjoyed in the book is the Jord character, and he seems like a very pivotal part of the story. Can you just tell us a bit more about that?
Well, the relationship between Jord and Chris, which is described in the book and which is elaborated on specifically by Jord, is the foundational crux of the entire existence of Propagandhi, in my view. Those two guys meeting each other when they were kids and playing a bunch of hockey together, like before they were even friends, is just so interesting to me because now both of them are in their mid 50s. And so we're looking at like 40 plus years of sustained friendship. And I can't remember exactly what year they said they met, but I mean, we're talking they started jamming together in 86. So they knew each other before that. So we're talking about a relationship between these two guys that goes back more than the full duration of my lifetime, and they are still, together. So I loved hearing George's reflections about that foundational relationship building, because just those two guys' paths never crossing in rural Manitoba would have deprived the world of what is my favorite art that exists on planet Earth. So
What some people are considering Canada's greatest export.
indeed, I have heard them called that. I have heard Propagandhi called Canada's greatest export by people with actual authority in music, by the way. So that to me, the Jord character is so pivotal because it gave me my favorite art that exists on this planet, hands down, which is, not even hyperbole for me to say that.
So you mentioned how the Jord and Chris characters, a pivotal part of their relationship and their bonding was through their love of hockey.
Hmm.
I'm interested as someone who grew up in St. Louis, um, what your relationship with the sport of hockey is.
A great relationship with the sport of hockey. My dad and I were huge Blues fans when I was a kid. My dad still is huge Blues fan.
That was the
And
Brett Hull Adam Oates era, correct?
absolutely, Janney, Oates, Shanahan, Scott
Who's the goalie? It
Stevens,
was
Craig
John
Janney,
Casey was the goalie.
John Casey, Curtis Joseph, Vince
Yep.
Riendo, um, Al McInnes. I
Yep.
mean, come on. Like, The people in St. Louis in the late 80s and early 90s were so disappointed because if you put like that lineup from those years like on paper, you're looking at a stacked and insanely talented group that should have gone farther than they did. They deprived St. Louis of a cup win in that generation, but they wound up getting one years later. But we would go to, I don't know, 10 games a year. My dad used to get these little 10-game ticket packages, and we would go. I saw games in the old arena in St. Louis, which was right across from Forest Park. So I saw Blues games in two different arenas growing up. And then in like 95, they opened up what was originally called the Kiel Center, and which still exists today and still where they play to this day, an arena right down the street from Union Station. But I had a huge relationship with hockey growing up. My Uncle Bob and my dad were super into hockey when they were kids. My Uncle Bob played hockey for years, and those two guys are still huge fans to this day. So I have a great relationship with hockey, and I always loved stuff when Propaganda would mention hockey in their records. The Steve Smith references in Resisting Tyrannical Government, I always thought were very funny. I didn't understand the message behind the lyrics for songs like that, but like seeing like, oh, hockey, cool, you know what I mean? And so that was a piece of the band that gripped me from a young age.
I really love the story arc of the Su Lin character. What
Cool.
inspired you to create such a beloved character?
Su Lin is so fun, and Su Lin is so enthusiastic about music, playing guitar, music theory, creative writing. And Su Lin was so supportive out of the gate of being involved with the podcast. If you look at chapter 2 on Tertium Non Dater, chapter 3 on The Only Good Fascist is a Very Dead Fascist, chapter 7 on Purina Hall of Fame, those interviews were recorded with Su Lin very, very early on in the existence of the podcast. And that's why, Su Lin is very featured throughout this book. It's a pretty, let me see how many times Su Lin's in here. So we got one, two, three, four, five. So Su Lin has actually been in the book more than Chris and Jord, which is pretty funny to me. But Su Lin is so enthusiastic. I am so delighted about Su Lin's forthcoming solo musical project. There are some singles out from Su Lin called, the recent one is Driving Off a Cliff 1967, and then another one was called Hot Drunken Steps. I know there is a full record recorded. So I love Su Lin. I think Su Lin is such a great bud, and Su Lin and I have hung out a couple of times in real life in New York City and in Winnipeg. So I kind of consider Su Lin a friend. Hopefully, Su Lin considers me one as well. And they are a wonderful addition to this book, and I cannot say enough good things about Su Lin.
Moving on to another character, the John K. Samson character honestly seems like such a mystery. He's mentioned a number of times, but we only hear his perspective once. Can you tell me more about this?
Yeah, there's only one perspective given from John Sampson. However, that one hits so hard because we covered so much ground in a very efficient period of time. And John talks about all of his contributions to Propagandhi. He talks about his current musical projects that he's doing under the moniker of Vivat Virtute. He also talks about his solo projects that he has been working on post breakup of the Weaker Thans. He also talks about his love of teaching and what he's doing at the Stony Mountain Institute in Manitoba with incarcerated people who are his students, and the zines that they make, and his favorite things about teaching. So we only hear from John once, but I really feel like we only needed to hear from John once because John is, you know, 29 years removed from his involvement with Propagandhi at this point, that he was such a good sport about coming on and chatting that I only really felt the need to have John on one time, and I got my questions answered. So I felt really great about John's participation in the book, even though it's only once.
And then moving on to the Beeve character,
Yeah.
a character that is beloved by many.
Yes.
I'm interested as to why you felt the need to just end his story in the book.
So Beeve's not in the band anymore, but he is in the book 5 times. And my favorite Beeve section in this book, hands down, is his chapter where we talk about building guitars and luthery. He goes into such great detail about what it's like to, be in Propagandhi, working on songs, learning it, his guitar process. But man, just hearing his stories of building guitars was so cool to me. Um, Beeve's story is still very much ongoing. He is in a band called Agassi in Manitoba. They are active. He's recording solo music under the name Kyle, which can be found on Bandcamp. So Beeve's story ends with guitar building mostly in the book because that's what he does. He's chilling in Winnipeg, building guitars, playing in Agassi, and living with his family. So his story is definitely not over yet, and we've featured his the story of his latest record on Unscripted Moments. So yeah, Beef's story is far from done.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Um, what does literary success look like to you?
There is no such thing because that will not be happening for a book like this. This book is so niche. And to me, the main motivating factor behind doing this book, there are two. One, I wanted there to be a physical artifact left behind in the world after I'm dead that can be on my daughter's bookshelf for the rest of her life. That is a physical artifact to commemorate this project that I've spent untold thousands of hours of my life creating so that she is left with something that is more tangible than a bunch of MP3 files that will be likely deleted from the internet when I stop paying for the Libsyn.com subscription. That's the main thing. The
Uh,
second thing is that I just thought that it was a nice little half decade in the life of my conversations with the folks in this band that I have a lot of respect for. And I just wanted to, do something for myself to kind of put a little ribbon on top of it. But there will be no financial success from this. I mean, I never plan to see a dime from this book in my life. And I'm perfectly fine with that because that's not why I did it.
I'm glad you answered the question that way because it really highlights how my process here of pre-planning follow-up questions,
Mm,
which you can see in my next question here. What
mm.
did you do with your first advance?
So there's no advance. I have spent thousands of hours creating this book with no money whatsoever. There was no advance. It is very, very unlikely that I will ever see a dime from this. And if the publisher makes their money back, I'll be really happy about that because they believed in my vision of the project from day one. They never tried to turn me into a round peg going through a square hole or whatever and change the vision of the book that I told them from day one, which I was really relieved about because this is not an authoritative biography of this band. This is not an oral history, complete oral history of this band. There's a lot of great stories in this book, but there's a lot of stuff that isn't told because it was never meant to be something like that. But yeah, no advance, unlikely to see any money. Hopefully, some copies get sold so that the publisher isn't furious at me for the rest of their lives.
Going back to reading in general, what would you say is the one book that you think every single person should read?
Oh my God. Like it- what where on earth? What people?
Every single person. What's one book that every single person could benefit from reading?
Can I do different genres?
No.
God. I mean, I think uh I think everybody right now should sit down and read On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. Off the top of my head, that's my answer.
Okay.
I think it's called
I have not read it, so I will read it. So I'm
oh,
taking your recommendation.
you can read it in 2 hours. It's only like 100 pages.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think you should read it. On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. I think it's called, I think the subtitle is 20 Lessons in Fascism from the 20th Century or something like that. Great book. Loved it.
I hear the foreword in this book was written by your most handsome friend. Can you tell me more about this?
Let me see. Steve Foster. You, I love this chapter. I was delighted that I badgered everybody into working at unreasonable speeds uh, at my whim. Um, I was a little bit of a, I was a little overzealous in how I got people to be involved in the book, but when something has to get done, it has to get done. So I appreciate you being so motivated to just hammer it out. And I really appreciated the kind things that you said about me and the project in general. It meant a lot. And I'm very delighted that you were able to fit your origin story of being a fan of Propagandhi, talking about other music that you enjoy, how you found the podcast, how you came to host the podcast, and then nice things that you had to say about the book, all in a single page. Let me see what your word count is here. I am so fascinated. 481 words. You did all of that 481 words. I mean, it's pretty stinking good. It's good writing, if I do say so myself.
Uh, hey, some of us just make things work.
You did. You did a great job. So I appreciate your inclusion. I think that it's an awesome forward. Because now that you've been involved in the podcast for like God 3 years, I think
Yeah.
it's really really cool to have you open the book.
Um, so who would you say this book is a who what kind of person would you say is a must own this book type person?
Um, I mean, if you love Propagandhi, as far as I know, it's the only book in the world about them, and it's not, a complete authoritative biography, but there's a lot in there, and there's some really cool photos. So I would say that if you're a moderate to serious fan of the band, you might really enjoy the book. If you're a super casual fan, probably not. But if
Is
you,
anyone a super casual fan of Propagandhi though? Does
I
that
don't
exist?
know, maybe. But here's the thing: if you don't personally feel like buying this book, which I totally get, I don't want to buy almost anything. I have to buy a new car soon, and I'm horrified. So if you don't want to buy the book, that's totally fine. However, if you are a supporter of public libraries, you can request that the library carry the ebook version or the paperback version by simply requesting it through your library. So even if you don't want to buy the book, totally fine. But if you are involved in your local library, maybe send them a little request so that they pick up a copy of the ebook.
So, one thing readers are dying to know.
Oh boy.
Are there any plans for a sequel? Because everyone wants to know how the story ends.
No.
Wow. We're just leaving it to mystery for everyone that's invested in these characters.
Yeah, the thing is that I have I'm going to put this in air quotes bothered the band enough in my view. They have been so profoundly kind to me throughout the years, and I'm trying to do better about leaving them alone and stuff like that. Life goes in new directions, and I feel as if we have done an amazing job here. I mean, the podcast is thousands of hours of audio talking about the music of the band, and I just don't see it. As far as a book sequel goes, who knows if there will ever be another interview, but there needs to be a really, really good reason to bother members of the band at this point to have them on the podcast.
Another thing that a few fans have reached out to me wanting to know is they've been dying to meet the mastermind behind these characters. Are there any book signings or events on the horizon?
Yeah, if you're in Toronto, Canada, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, on September 13th, 2025 for the Propagandhi shows at, what is it, the concert hall or something?
The concert hall, yes, formerly the location of MTV Canada.
Oh, fascinating. So if you're in Toronto for those shows, I'll be at a place called Emissions Records, probably in the afternoon. I think it's going to be from like 1 to 3 or 2 to 4 or something like that. But I will be there standing in the corner awkwardly at a folding table with a little pile of books, probably reading something else, probably trying to blend into the wall. But I will be there. If you want to come and say hi, please do. I think I'll have copies of the CD compilation as well with me. So that will be that is the one thing so far that I know that I'm definitely doing. And hopefully if the band announces something in Winnipeg, hopefully I can go up there and do something in their hometown as well.
You mentioned the CD compilation just now. Can you just give us a brief overview of of how that came to be and what exactly the CD compilation is?
Sure. So throughout the life of the podcast, we've had hundreds of episodes, and on those hundreds of episodes, we have featured many covers of listeners from the podcast, including recording themselves playing Propagandhi songs, either alone or the band. And I picked 32 of those songs. 17 are full band electric versions, and 15 are acoustic songs, and I had them mastered by audio engineer in southern Manitoba named Paul Hodgert. And Paul has actually got a couple of songs on the album as well. So thanks, Paul. And I was a very vicious boss to Paul as well, and he was mastering stuff so quickly and just working so hard on it. So I cannot say enough kind things about him on this project, but it's a 32 track double album compilation. And the layout of the CD version was done by a local Winnipeg artist named Jamie Fougere. So Jamie did the entire layout of the outside and inside of the CD jacket. But yeah, it's a really cool collection. Some of my favorite songs on the compilation are, oh man, the Deer Coach's Corner by Emily Plamondon and Carl Bullets is amazing. Emily also did a Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes with Ian Leger, which is super good. The Savage Nobles did Comply Resist, which was so good. My friend Andy Treester from the band Stinkbug in Portland did Fixed Frequencies. Yeah, Paul and his son Lou and Steven Yarushi and Matt Milkowski did a really cool Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. There's so much on there. And Matt Comtois, oh my God, did that French cover of Adventures in Zoochosis called Aventure en Zoochosis. So there's some really cool stuff on there, and you can get it. I think it's going to be on streaming. I think it'll be on streaming services. It's coming out from Engineer Records in the UK. And if you want the CD, you can buy it directly from Engineer's website, or you can also pre-order the book and the CD as like a combo package. But you can only do that through the publisher So if you're in Europe or the UK, the shipping is totally reasonable. But if you're anywhere else in the world, the shipping is like the same. The shipping for the book and the CD is like the same price as the book. So not amazing shipping options, but the book is starting to pop up on things like Kobo e-reader pre-orders and McNally Robinson in Canada. Uh, Booktopia, I think in Australia is going to carry it. There are some Danish and Belgian publishers that the ISBN number has popped up on lately. Some options in Asia have started to pop up on the ISBN if you search that. So there's a lot out there that's coming up little by little.
My next question was, where can readers get themselves a copy of this book? But it looks like you've already answered that.
Yeah, so the website is just earthislandbooks.com, but if you go on earthislandbooks.com and you click on the shop button and you click on the book, it will give you the ISBN number, which is 978-191-686-4696, and you copy that and you drop it into a search bar on an internet browser. You'll see links immediately pop up from McNally Robinson, Booktopia, Brown's Books, Bocus, Adlibris, Bowl.com, Walmart, and more. So there's a bunch of options that pop up if you search that ISBN number. And people are ordering it from their local bookstores as well. There's a place in Hamilton that somebody said they were ordering it from. So it can definitely be done locally at your independent bookstores as well.
That's so great to hear. There's so many different places to get a copy of this book. I highly recommend that everyone listening go out and grab a copy because it is a wonderful read. And I would like to thank Greg for being a guest on the show today.
Yes, thank you. I also want to shout out Matt Milkowski and Justin Santora, who did the book artwork. And I also want to shout out Nathan Jones in Australia, who contributed photos to the inside of the book. And also Mark X. Miller, who is a fantastic photographer here in Buffalo who documents Southern Ontario and Western New York punk and hardcore photography going back 30 years. So thank you so much to Mark, Nathan, Matt, and Justin for their help with the visual contents inside the book. Really, really awesome to work with all of them, and as well as Paul, who contributed an interview with Todd to the book and helped out a little bit here and there with some editing. But yeah, it's been a good time, man. I appreciate you wanting to do this.
Is there any other things that you'd like to plug before we wrap up?
No, you can email me propagandipod@gmail.com as always. And coming up in the future, we will make episodes on In Flagrante Delicto, Cognitive Suicide, and Unscripted Moment. So we are almost done with the original discography, which is the next thing that I'm really stoked about doing is finishing the 1989 to 2024 recorded Propagandhi output. So yeah, it's good times, bud.
We've got a lot of exciting things coming up on the show, and just want to thank everyone for their continued listenership and trusting us with your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. And so happy Friday, and I'm gonna bust out of here now.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.